Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us for today's masterclass, Building Back Inclusively, COVID-19 Sustainability and Gender Equality. We are delighted that you've been able to join us. But now I'd like to just welcome our country director, Wangeshi Morioki, to give a brief welcome remark as well as set up the stage for our speaker of the day. Welcome, Wangeshi.
Thanks so much, Terry, and to all our distinguished participants, this is a great moment and a great day for us. So mine is very simple. I don't want to take a lot of time. I'm sure all of us are very curious because of the theme of today's masterclass on building back inclusively, sustainably. It's so important that we start thinking about the future of our business and how we are going to be relevant in a very challenging and competitive world, which is why we have chosen among the best in class to take us through today's masterclass on building back inclusively and to also focus on gender. Just to set us up, for those who may be very new to Invest in Africa, we are a private sector, not-for-profit initiative that is laser focused on supporting small and medium enterprises. And we are running a high impact network where we partner with a lot of organizations. We're working with the private sector, large organizations who buy from SMEs. We collaborate very closely with organizations that are supporting SMEs in building the skills and competencies, and capacities to ensure that they are competitive enough to work with large organizations. And we also work around supporting access to finance for SMEs. So we partner with banks, we work with DFIs, we look for opportunities to ensure that there is ready finance, there is workable finance for SMEs, all in a bid to ensure that our local businesses and our local companies are ready, are competitive, and that they're growing and scaling, because the future of Africa, like I always say, lies in sustainably developing small and medium enterprises. And that is why we have a lot of people on our network now. We are running a network of more than 3,000 organizations, all working together to achieve the same objective. We've got more than 3,000 SMEs. We have more than 30 partners right now, and we are growing. We encourage everyone to join this network so that we can build the future of our country. And so today, just talking about today's masterclass, the theme just excites me. We are discussing how we can build back inclusively and how we can build back sustainably. We're running this masterclass under our ongoing SME recovery and resilience program, with the understanding that businesses have really been hard hit. And through support and partnership we have from the Mastercard Foundation to help you or to help entrepreneurs through masterclasses, coaching, peer-to-peer sessions, improving access to finance. And we also are running a knowledge academy where you can access best practice guides, toolkits, and resources. So this is part of our wider program, and we're encouraging you to join masterclasses when you can, or invite others, because there's much more to this 1.5 hour engagement. We are partnering with the best in class, just like I have said, and I'm quite excited to be introducing our facilitator of the day today. So on today's masterclass, we are here obviously because we are affected by COVID, and we are all thinking about how are we going to build back better? How are we going to grow? How do we grow, ensuring that we are relevant in a future that is affected by COVID? And like we've all seen, most organizations are now stepping up. They're upping their game so that they can look at what is the immediate opportunity in order to provide or to bridge the gaps. Right now, importing, exporting is quite a challenge. And in order to ensure that their businesses are a going concern, organizations are now stepping up to provide for their communities. And this is a huge potential for all of us and learning for us as businesses, mid-sized organizations, small companies, to start scaling up or to start rethinking business. How do we step up? How do we scale in a COVID world in a sustainable way? And this is a topic that is relatively new and quite often misunderstood. What is sustainability? What are the processes, that you can put in place to ensure that you have a strong business that can survive and that will be resilient in a new world of COVID? So the reason why we have invited our guest speaker today is because we have an expert in that area of sustainability who's going to break it down for us to make us understand what are the principles, how do you build this, can a small business embrace sustainability? Is this just for the large organizations and the multinationals? We are here to engage our expert today and to learn together. So looking at our masterclass today, this is very interactive. We are going first of all to just highlight what we were like, what was business like prior to COVID-19. The new reality is quickly making us shift and pivot, and it's very easy to forget where we are really coming from. So where are we today, and what was our state, and how can sustainability and, more importantly, gender equality affect our performance? And like I said, gender equality needs to be understood, it needs to be unpacked, and I'm really looking forward to engaging our expert guest whom we are hosting today. And finally, this is meant to help us get started on building a future, the future for our businesses, and looking at what are the next practical steps. We're talking about building sustainability into our processes, embedding sustainability, and embedding gender inclusion, whether this is in procurement, is in employing staff, and so on. So we are very, very happy because this is really the global theme, and we want to build our organizations very strongly to be able to be relevant in a global world. And so allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our speaker today. And her name is Roslyn Kanya. As you can see, she's the managing director of Kina Advisory Limited. So we are partnering and collaborating with Kina Advisory based in London. So we are bringing the best in class, and we are truly honored to be hosting such an experienced person of a high caliber. I'm sure you can all see her profile projected right there. But just to talk about Roslyn in a few words, is that first of all, she is an advisor to organizations in Africa and in Europe, and she's built quite a number of partnerships across the work that she does. She's got decades of experience in government relations, political risk management, and the topic of the day, sustainability. A lot of her experience has been in oil and gas, in mining, and in the power sectors. So first of all, she's a lawyer by training. So she's a member of the Bar of England and Wales, and she is a non-executive director and advisor of Invest in Africa. She's been sitting there on that table for very many years. So we are really proud to have someone like Roslyn talking to us today. So apart from that, she also serves on many other boards. As you can see, she's a non-executive director of Carl Bank Africa Gifted Foundation. She's the founding president of the Ghana chapter of International Women's Forum, and she's got quite a number of board engagements. She has also been previously an executive director of the Norwegian oil company, James Africa, and many others. So if we read her profile, we might actually be here for half the time or half the day. She's an award winner. So I just want to highlight that to let us know who we are. We have today, somebody dedicating all her time to her precious time to engage us. So let's make the best out of this opportunity. I would like us to make it as interactive as possible. We are learning together. I'm also looking forward to learning with Rosalie. And without further ado, allow me to welcome her.
So thank you, Wangechi, and thank you, Terry. Thank you to Invest in Africa. As I said, I have been with Invest in Africa since its conception, been associated with in one way or the other. Thank you to MasterCard Foundation also for providing this opportunity. So just to start with, to give a bit of context, I woke up on Saturday morning to the news of the death of one of my role models, a champion of all human rights, and specifically of gender equality. Some of you might have heard about her death in the news, the US Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg, or as she was popularly known, RBG. She famously and very simply said, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. Now, personally, I had a very interesting conversation last week with a very well-meaning gentleman about board positions. It was a 45-minute conversation, and half of that time, the focus was on the fact that I was a woman, obviously, and that I was an African woman. The implication that in these times of Black Lives Matter, there would definitely be opportunities open for me on boards. As Wangechi showed, I am on a board and have served on others. I explained as graciously to my friend that the facts that I was female and of a darker hue in of themselves should make no difference as to whether I'm qualified to be a board member. I think companies should determine what experience and expertise they need to support their agendas and objectives, and then go out and objectively look for those who have those skills and expertise. It is actually more intentional and very subjective to have a company where everyone looks, thinks, and speaks the same, and more natural and objective to have a company with a diversity of people. And this doesn't just apply at the top of the company, it applies throughout the business. In this webinar, I want to focus on throughout the business and not so much on what happens at the top, even though that's important. But I do at the end give some suggestions about what we all, whether at the top, in the middle, just coming into the business, can do to make sure like RGBG, we're making new pathways and keeping open those that have been made. I will do a quick introduction about the current state of gender equality in the workplace and the impact of COVID-19. I will make the business case for gender equality. I'll explain why it is necessary, though sadly, to make that business case. I will also make some recommendations about practical steps that businesses can take in making sure that there is gender equality in their business. And then we'll have some concluding remarks and some questions. Now, I'm going to speak for quite a while, but there's going to be a slight break between 2 and 3, where I'm going to pose a question. IA will pose that question in the chat, and I'd like us to take a few minutes, a minute or two, to look at the question, which I'll tell you about later at the time, and to answer that question. But moving ahead, I always believe that we should all be on the same page and speak the same language. So I'm sure many of you have heard of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. We've talked about sustainability and gender equality in the workplace, but I thought it would be good to give some simple definitions of what we mean by this. So in the E, environmental and ESG, for us means taking care of your natural surroundings, making sure that your business operations don't have adverse impacts on the air that we breathe, the water that we drink. The S is taking care of people who are impacted by your business operations, starting from your employees, your suppliers, your customers, local communities, your neighbors, and for many of us too, it could be our shareholders. The G is doing business efficiently and with integrity. This is how your company polices itself on issues like leadership, board diversity, internal controls and audits, making sure there's no bribery and corruption, and so on and so forth. When it comes to sustainability for us, it's a demonstrable and measurable commitment to your environment, your people, and doing business with integrity. And also a commitment to the broader global goals to end poverty. Wangechi put up a slide which shows the United Nations Sustainable Goals, the SDGs. And just to make sure that no one is left out, the SDGs are a global blueprint for achieving a better and sustainable future for everyone. They give guidance to address global challenges that we all face, including those related to poverty, inequality, including gender inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and justice. Then workplace gender equality is achieved when both men and women can access and enjoy the same rewards, resources, and opportunities. And these include equal pay and benefits for comparable roles, equal consideration of needs, equal opportunities for progression and access to all occupations within an industry, including leadership roles, and the elimination of discrimination on the basis of gender, particularly in relation to family and caring responsibilities. And you'll hear me speak a lot about this on this issue of family and caring responsibilities. So I would like to take us through a journey of the impact that COVID-19, the pandemic, has had on gender equality in Africa. Considering that this pandemic is less than a year old, I have to say that the adverse impact it has had on gender equality has been quite disproportionate. Now, for leaders, next slide, please. So in this slide, I'm going to discuss why sustainability and gender equality are so important at this time. For leaders across the globe, the COVID-19 pandemic is proving to be one of the greatest leadership tests of their careers. Not only must they protect their employees and customers, but they must also deal with the disruptions to their operations, plan for recovery, imagine business models for the future. Yeah, sorry, could everyone mute their... I think it's, yeah, thank you. Without being clear about exactly what the future will look like. Now, business in Africa, as I'm sure all of you on this call know, face numerous short-term performance pressures, such as capital and cash flow constraints, access to markets, finding and maintaining clients, customers, and employees, and complying with such a wide variety of regulations which come with cost. And they're constantly needing to walk a fine line between balancing these short-term pressures as well as investing in their long-term future. And COVID-19 has made this even harder. Within this challenging context, the task of sustainable business practices and promoting gender equality could easily take a back seat. However, one thing is clear. The COVID-19 pandemic and the responses to it have emphasized the need to build back better. There are calls, for example, for governments and business leaders to do more to tackle inequalities which have been highlighted by COVID-19, to provide secure and well-paid jobs, and to promote a green recovery. As we'll demonstrate during this presentation, sustainability and gender equality, more specifically, are powerful enablers of business performance. Companies whose leaders adopt sustainable business practices and promote gender equality as part of that are likely to strengthen their current recovery and better position themselves for growth and renewal. Some of the qualities that characterize gender inclusive companies, notably innovation and resilience, will be much needed as companies look to recover from the crisis. Promoting gender equality will allow companies to better contribute to wider efforts to revive economies, safeguard social cohesion, and contribute to progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 5 on gender equality and Goal 8 on decent work and economic growth. Now, I'm very well aware that the majority of us on this call will be SMEs who may be wondering that faced with our everyday challenges, where can I find the space, time, and energy to contribute to what appear to be such lofty goals? But the truth is that without your participation, these goals will never be reached. And these goals are important for all of us. And although no one knows the exact figure, it's estimated that SMEs contribute to 90% of employment globally. And I'm sure that is no different on the continent. Again, some of you may wonder, why should we focus on women and girls? Why shouldn't we just focus on empowering everyone, women and girls, men and boys? Their answer is because there is a gap between the opportunities and resources that are currently available to our fathers, sons, and brothers on the one hand, and those that are available to us as women and girls on the other. And only by closing this gap can everyone, both men and women, stand to benefit. And it will have wide-reaching effects both for businesses and for society. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the state of gender equality in the workplace in Africa's 10 fastest growing economies. And it actually was put together based on a research by an organization called the Boardroom Africa that is focused on getting African women onto boards of companies, both African companies and international companies. Now, the information provided is really focused on the boardroom at this moment, but please, I will come to where it applies to all of us. Now, this study shows that gender diversity among Africa's top 10 fastest growing economies is relatively good. Rwanda has the highest percentage of women on boards with 27%, followed by Kenya with 24%, and South Africa by 22%. And this compares with a global average of 17%. So on the whole, we can see that most of the top economies in Africa are doing very well compared to the global average. So at first glance then, it looks like Africa's progress towards gender equality in the workplace is positive. However, these are pockets of good news. And they tend to be about successful women at the top of the pyramid and not for the millions of ordinary African women. Next slide, please. Again, this slide, another slide on the state of gender, what I call inequality at work. And again, it shows a comparison between where African countries stand on average in the orange bars and the world average in the blue. And we can see that the region has made notable advances in getting women into executive committees and board positions, but not so well at elevating women into middle management. And this implies that executive committees and boards will remain male-dominated well into the future if this issue isn't tackled. And according to a McKinsey report from which this was taken, the share of women in middle management has actually regressed on average by approximately 1% a year since 2014. So compared to the global average, the lower bar on the chart, Africa has a high level of participation of women in the labor force. However, there are too few women who make it into high quality professional and technical jobs. And the vast majority of African women working low paid, often subsistence jobs in the informal sector. And using Kenya as an example, and forgive me, I have a lot of Kenyan examples because it was IIA Kenya that approached us on this. So we thought our audience would be primarily Kenyan and look for mostly Kenyan examples, but we have a few from other parts of the continent. So in Kenya's formal economy, we found that women get paid 32% less than men. The worldwide figure stands at 23%. In close to 1/3 of sub-Saharan African countries where we have data, the share of women in informal employment outside of the agricultural sector, this is 90%. That is a huge amount. And this is partly because unpaid work, like childcare, for instance, continues to fall disproportionately on women's shoulders. This leaves them with less of a choice about where to work and few opportunities to find jobs in the formal sector. And at the current rate of progress, if we continue at this rate, even with those wonderful statistics about board levels, it will take Africa 140 years to reach gender parity. I'm sure you can all agree that we don't have that time and shouldn't allow for this to happen. So this next slide shows different statistics across Africa. I want to make sure that I don't put everyone into the one Africa basket, as the statistics vary. So we see, for example, that in South Africa and Nigeria, those countries score very highly in getting women into professional and technical jobs. Unfortunately, Kenya and Egypt score poorly on getting women into leadership positions. Out of the countries shown, Zambia is the poorest performing country with regards to getting women into formal employment, whilst Egypt is the best performing in this area. Now, because of this failure to advance gender equality, millions of women will not reach their full potential. Women do need access to economic opportunities if countries are to realize the full potential of their human capital and to realize the full potential of their full economic and social potential. Intentionally creating pathways for African women into better paid, fulfilling jobs should be a major priority for both business leaders and for governments. So now we've had this background, and so what has COVID meant for this gender equality journey? Unfortunately, there has been a disproportionate effect on women and girls. And if anyone has listened to any webinars on sustainability or gender issues, that has constantly been repeated. It appears that the limited gains that have been made in recent years on gender equality within Africa's business sector are at risk as a result of the pandemic. And this is compounded by the patriarchal systems that restrict women's economic empowerment anyway. And so looking at, for example, health effects, according to the WHO, women constitute 70% of health workers worldwide. And it therefore means that women are more exposed to the virus. We have had reports of increased violence against women during the pandemic. For example, the UN Population Fund has estimated that an additional 31 million cases of gender-based violence were perpetrated in the first 6 months alone of the pandemic. And by economically empowering women and supporting women to be more influential, we can help to address the underlying power dynamics which lead to gender-based violence. Economic effects. Women are overrepresented in lower skilled, lower paid and informal jobs, and therefore face a higher risk of job and income security. Globally, 31 million out of 44 million workers in vulnerable sectors that could lose their jobs will be women. I'll repeat that. 31 million out of 44 million workers in vulnerable sectors that could lose their jobs will be women. And this could wipe out $1 trillion from the global GDP. Similarly, McKinsey estimates that women are almost twice as likely as men to lose their jobs as a result of this pandemic. And this is exacerbated by the traditional societal mindsets about the role of women. And this affects the current decision-making, both at organizational and family level, about who gets to keep their job. World Values survey showed that more than half of respondents in countries in South Asia, the Middle East, and North America agreed, this is over 50%, that men have the right to a job more than women do when jobs are at risk or scarce. And it's interesting to know that this is not just a view held in emerging economies, but 1 in 6 respondents in developed countries also thought the same. And we found that women are taking on additional responsibility for both childcare and care of the elderly during this pandemic, with schools closed and older relatives needing more support. This puts an additional demand on women, making it harder for them to balance the already stressful work loads that they have and putting them at greater risk of income loss. And we've seen this happen before. After the Ebola pandemic outbreak, women found it harder to regain employment or earn an income, and their positions as unpaid caregivers was reinforced. Then we have the digital exclusion. Now, closing the gender gap in digital inclusion is an urgent priority. Many essentials have migrated to online channels, making it harder to manage our day-to-day businesses of living without access to digital devices. And it's not just about the device, it's about the access to the internet in order to transact our everyday activities. And we found that women in Kenya are 34% less likely than men to have access to mobile internet. They may have the phone, it is about the access to internet. And in Senegal, women are 19% less likely to have access to mobile internet. So again, this is a very important issue that has impact of COVID. Now, we've discussed the impact of COVID on gender inequality. However, with or without COVID, women in the workforce, regardless of industry, face many common challenges and deep-rooted obstacles that prevent them from achieving their full potential at work. And I have set out some of these in this slide. So we have structural and cultural barriers that result in educational gaps which prevent women from attaining good quality jobs. And we know that many of our African governments have put in place great policies to ensure equal opportunity in education for all. But the issue is always been in the execution, the putting into action of those policies. And for example, the Ministry of Education in Kenya records that of 85% of learners who progress from primary to secondary school, 30% proceed to higher education. However, women account for just 1/3, 30% of this total number. We then have the stereotyping about gender roles. And as I've said before, and we'll keep repeating, that unpaid care work falls disproportionately on women, and that is childcare and domestic duties. And what is quite interesting is that a survey of children in Côte d'Ivoire found that 68% of boys and 56% of girls think that domestic chores are the woman's responsibility. So we have a lot of work to do, not just in educating ourselves and our peers, but in making sure that our children, the next generation and our children, really understand the issues relating to gender equality and gender and the disadvantages to all humankind of gender inequality. This stereotyping is combined with the absence of good childcare options and decent maternity leave. We find that there are limited opportunities for career progression and training and development for women in the workplace. And then another issue is the limited number of accessible female role models. There are female role models, but what I find is that sometimes a lot of them seem absolutely inaccessible to others who are along this journey. And this contributes to a limiting mindset among women that no, we cannot achieve, because even if you see somebody making it to the top, you think, well, they're so far away, it must be very special. And so one thing I've personally enjoyed doing is mentoring young African women. And just to show that, there are challenges along the way. I'm real, I'm touchable, but we can make them, I've made them, and we can help each other make them along the way. And I think this lack of confidence that comes up from this limiting mindset prohibits women from taking the necessary risks to advance their careers, from networking with colleagues, and for advocating for their own advancement. We then have the issue of risk to personal safety at work, and women are more at risk of sexual harassment at the workplace. And the sad thing I have to say is that in Africa, it's almost an acceptable norm, and that really and truly does break my heart. When the Me Too movement started in the rest of the world, I noticed that it didn't take off very much in African countries, because it was, it would be seen to be making too much of a fuss. And for me, it is totally acceptable, any sexual advancements, any sexual harassment in any form. And often women are limited in the channels through which they can voice their concerns. And if they do, they might immediately become sidelined. Interestingly, in the area of personal safety too, one survey found that in Ghana, 28% of women were concerned about the availability and safety of transportation, particularly to and from work. Then I've talked about women being in low paying, low quality and more vulnerable jobs. Again, a challenge that they face with or without COVID. And then the big thing is the access to finance, or what I call the lack of access to finance. And this is both lack of access to finance for personal well-being as well as for business. According to the World Bank, only 37% of women in sub-Saharan Africa have a bank account. And there's a $300 billion gap in financing for formal women-owned small businesses. So you can imagine that if you added the informal, what a huge gap that would be. So well done to organizations such as Invest in Africa, supported by the Masterclass Foundation, for really delving and trying to help to bridge this gap. And more than 70% of women-owned SMEs have inadequate or no access to financial services. Now, the result is that the women find it difficult to collect income and to save, difficult to grow their business, and difficult just to help pull their families out of poverty. And the commonalities mean that there's a lot that can be shared and learned across industries on these challenges and how to tackle them. Now, this is where I am going to take a bit of a breather, have a sip of water, and I'm hoping that Invest in Africa are going to pose into the chat box the question that I have, which is, investing in women is not only the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do, yes or no? And whatever your answer is, please give a reason for your answer. Again, to repeat this, investing in women is not only the right thing to do, but is the smart thing to do, yes or no? And Invest in Africa will go through your responses and share them at the end of the presentation. And we can use your responses and any questions you have as the basis for our discussion going forward. So I've always been clear, and I'm speaking to businesses here, and I'm a business myself, that businesses are not charities, and that their existence is predicated on their ability to make profit. In our role, Kina Interstrat Partnership, as advisors on sustainability, we always make a point to demonstrate that environmental, social, and governance standards or sustainability standards and practices contribute to the financial bottom line, be it the Kenyan shilling bottom line, the Ghana cedi bottom line, the Senegal CFR bottom line, or the US dollar bottom line. Whichever bottom line, sustainability standards and practices will contribute to that figure. Now, it's a pity that we need to make a business case or any case at all for gender equality. I thought it would be an obvious no question. But the last thing I want is for any business, big, small, or medium, to think that gender equality means doing women a favor. What is clear is that doing nothing to maintain or advance gender equality could negatively influence both the economic and social lives of women, as well as economic growth more broadly. By contrast, investing in women and girls represents a significant opportunity to improve gender equality, drive inclusive economic growth, and improve a company's performance. Now, there is a strong link, a proven strong link between gender diversity at leadership level, which is important, and strong business performance. Research has shown that companies with a greater share of women on their boards and in the executive committees tend to perform better financially. So S&P Global, in a 2019 study, found that firms with female CEOs and CFOs have produced superior share price performance compared to the market average. In the 24 months post-appointment, female CEOs saw a 20% increase in stock price movement, and female CFOs saw a 6% increase in profitability and 8% larger stock returns. And African companies are no different in this respect. And McKinsey has, over a period of years, done research on women in the African workplace. And in 2016, found that African companies with at least a quarter share of women on their boards achieved 20% higher earnings before taxes and interest. 2019, they found that companies in Africa with revenues of more than 5 billion were doing the best at getting women on their boards, with around 80% of them having at least 20% female representation on boards. This shows a positive correlation between the number of women in leadership positions and a company's financial performance. So having women in leadership is key to addressing the gender equality issues throughout the business. Women who are making it or at the top or making it on the journey to the top can and should champion a strong pipeline of female talent across the entire workforce. However, while focusing on women in leadership is essential, it perhaps risks overshadowing the potential gains that can be made by investing in women as employees at all levels in a company. After all, for the majority of us African women, the world of work remains a story of low wages, insecurity, and limited opportunities. The business case for investing in women as employees through all levels of business is diverse and wide-reaching. And we have collected examples of African businesses that have invested in gender-smart initiatives and have seen clear return from doing so. So in the next few slides, we will give examples of individual businesses that have reduced costs, improved productivity, recruited the best talent, opened up access to new or markets or improved existing markets, improved their stakeholder relationships and their branding, and improved access to capital. So just to start with reducing cost, ensuring that both women and men have equal access to training does help companies utilize their existing talent and can lead to saving in recruitment costs. An example that we've come across is Finlay's Horticulture in Kenya, which ensures intentionally that it makes training available to both men and women with the company. And this provided Finlay's with a large pool of skilled and motivated workers who could be promoted throughout the company ranks. The company estimated that between 2010 and 2012, it promoted the internal promotion of 69 women resulted in savings of 17 million Kenya shillings, which for those of us who are not Kenyan is equivalent of approximately $200,000 in relation to advertising costs, training, and lost productivity. Coming to improved productivity, investments in initiatives to help women and men improve work-life balance, such as child support, healthcare, health services, and access to alternative and flexible working arrangements can have positive impacts on employee turnover and absenteeism. And I've personally said women and men here. I've had the opportunity to be on the board of a Norwegian oil and gas company, and it meant that I needed to visit Norway a number of times. And I was very impressed by the number of men who were off on paternity leave, because I believe in Norway it is compulsory for both men and women to have paternity leave in order to share the privilege of looking after their children. So I think it's important for companies to be able to think about how do we make sure that load we put in place initiatives to ensure that load is properly shared. And again, an example is Redland Roses, a floricultural business, again in Kenya, found that women's unplanned leave declined by 25% and productivity improved within 1 year of opening childcare facilities. Safaricom, which is a big player in the Kenyan market, has a baby care center, I believe, as its office in Westlands, where employees can take their children while they're at work, and if the child falls sick, there's an in-house clinic to take the child to. And even though childcare support benefits all workers, to date, until we change the dynamics, it definitely is women workers who benefit the most. Another example, a little further afield in India, is a company, a grocery retailer known as the Big Basket, which had been struggling with attrition rates of 10 to 15% per month at its distribution centers in Pune. So they decided to hire women as stock pickers. This is traditionally a man's job in order to increase retention. After the implementation of this initiative, productivity went up to 87%. And of the trial bunch of 24 women who were hired in July, none have quit, and they have since added 34 more women to the team. And because this pilot has been so successful, they're rolling it out in other cities, therefore just increasing employment opportunities for women. Again, this is, as you can see, this is of benefit to the business itself. Now, coming closer home to Ghana, and those of you on the call from Ghana would know of the company Zen Petroleum, which, among other things, transports fuel across the country. And William Terrier, who I know personally, is the managing director of Zen. Now, he found that his male drivers were siphoning off supplies as the trucks were traveling. So he had this bright idea to hire women truckers instead. And in doing so, he decided to invest in a dream of a woman called Pinyin Mafo, who wanted to set up an all-female truck driving company. So in 2018, Ladybird Logistics was formed. And the siphoning for Zen Petroleum, the siphoning stopped. I forgot to mention that Zen could lose up to $50,000 a month as a result of this siphoning. Siphoning is a polite word for stealing, for the siphoning. And the siphoning stopped, the loss stopped, and as William himself says, he sleeps better at night. Zen remains the largest shareholder in Ladybirds. The company has now got 37 women truck drivers, has driven 520,000 kilometers without lost time injury, and was recently awarded, and remember that it's only been formed since 2018, been given an award by the Women International Truckers Organization. So a great success story, again, benefit to women's employment and business, and a benefit to the business to whom it is a customer. And then finally, in this section, recruiting the best talent. Actively recruiting women increases the talent pool, particularly when it comes to science, technology, engineering, and maths focused sectors. Here, we find that women remain an untapped resource of skills and knowledge, and adding more women to the workforce creates value in terms of diversity of opinions, experience, and expertise. We believe, I know, for example, that Safaricom has a Women in Technology program which targets high school students and graduates to help bridge the gender gap in technology sector, and ultimately increasing the talented individuals available to their company. Now, I can speak also from personal experience. I am on a trustee and vice chair of an organization called the Africa Gifted Foundation. We have a sixth form science academy for African young women. It's based in Ghana. It is small. We've been open for 4 years now. We take on 24 women, young girls a year to study maths, advanced maths, physics, computing, within a year. It's an A-level course that they do in a year, and our students have gone on to amazing universities. We're tracking them, and this is our way of putting back into the STEM workforce. The other value is that hiring more women helps companies relate to their customers better. As a company with greater gender diversity is better positioned to understand the needs of its women customers. Women influence roughly $15 trillion of global consuming spending, and therefore can offer unique insight into how products and services can better serve their needs. For example, Lighting Africa, which is an off-grid renewable energy initiative by the World Bank, found that at household level, 80% of their customers were women. And through a team of 400 female staff, Lighting Africa has been able to identify their needs and expand this market. Another example, EnviroFit International piloted a women's empowerment training program for clean cook stove sales agents in Kenya. And this resulted in women outselling cook stoves compared to their male counterparts by 3 to 1. Women employees can also provide greater access to last mile consumers. The International Finance Corporation and the microfinance institution Finca in the Democratic Republic of Congo developed a network of online agents to provide Finca's banking services to low-income customers. They found that women agents were more likely to be located in communities that lacked basic banking services and were therefore more successful than male agents in helping Finca to connect with prospective customers. They recorded an average of 12% more transactions a month and 16% higher net profits. Just quickly, proactive commitment to gender equality can improve community relations. Anglo-Americans found that employing more women on their site meant that more women and men alike could share information about the company and act as ambassadors. And then access to capital. We are finding that development financial institutions are prioritizing gender equality in future investments to increase resilience to future shocks by contributing to a more equal and stable private sector. So in the immediate and distant future, we'll find that DFIs will look to increase their investment in businesses that make a conscious effort to promote gender equality. Some of these benefits that I've mentioned are short term, some of them are longer term, but they don't all arise in isolation. They often work in tandem with each other, but they are there to demonstrate that individual companies can gain a competitive advantage by improving gender equality in their business. Next slide, please. So now to what can you do? What can we do practically to promote gender equality? Now, the recommendations I've made on this slide are in no particular order, but I want to pull one out as the most important. Engage in discussions with women in your workforce to better understand their experiences and their challenges. Now, even if you're an all-women organization, still sit down together and talk about what the challenges you face, the experiences you face, because you'll be interacting with the broader world outside. But for companies who have a gender mix as it is, to make sure that you get the best answers, consider making the process of this engagement anonymous. I mean, some women don't mind speaking up, but others might be a little hesitant. And women should be active participants in designing and establishing the policies and practices that will benefit them and make them more productive and engaged workers. There's no need just asking them what they think and then huddling around in a corner as men to design what will make it right for women. They should be right in the midst of it. And I'll say to women in the workforce, when opportunities are offered to participate in this sort of engagement, please do participate. And if they are not, create opportunities for such discussion, especially if you find yourself at the top of the food chain or you find yourself sitting next to somebody who's at the top of the food chain. The next thing is for companies to understand their current level of gender equality. They can do so by asking themselves certain key questions, such as, does the business have at least 30% share of women in senior management positions? And if not, how can this be achieved? Does the company have a representative share of women in the workforce throughout? What is the gender pay gap between men and women in the company? Are you aware of all the local laws relating to women in the workforce, for example, childcare, equal pay, maternity leave? And are your employees, and are you complying with these laws? Is there any risk of gender discrimination of any sort within your business? What steps are you taking to improve gender equality? Does the business have a gender equality statement that states and explains that the business will provide equal opportunities and avoid discrimination? Next thing is to build your own business case. Now, we've given examples of a business case for gender equality, but each company will need to build its own business case for improving gender equality and diversity and communicate that case very simply and clearly to ensure that it has support. And you should start by thinking about your own business objectives and the value drivers that contribute to those objectives, and consider how gender diversity could contribute to achieving those. You should also think about, in deciding on your business case, what are the challenges that your particular business faces? Is there staff turnover rates too high? Is there low productivity? Do you have a poor brand image? And then consider how looking at these challenges through a gender lens might help to bring a solution. Then most importantly, it's one thing to put measures in place, but it's also important to measure the outcomes of these measures, to look at the costs and benefits of the interventions of supporting women in the workplace. Now, remember that not all those benefits can be quantified or monetized, and some are more longer term and seemingly less tangible. For example, things like reputational gains or improved stakeholder relations. But even though they may not be quantifiable, does not mean that they're not important. They are very important. Another thing, this journey is not one that any of us can go on our own. Creating partnerships is essential to achieving change. And therefore, and particularly when it comes to efforts to change widespread attitudes about women's role in society, it requires actions from business, government, civil organizations, and from all of us, wherever we find ourselves. One of the things businesses can do to drive this change forward is to create partnerships, for example, with local grassroots women organizations, development finance institutions, local governments, and industry peers. And an example could be for companies to sort of get together through the associations to advocate for issues such as removing laws that restrict women's land ownership, which unfortunately still exist. Now, this is a means of opening up access to finance for women, both for personal finance and for business finance. Or they can channel funds into organizations or programs that support women's organization, education and entrepreneurship. And to begin to collaborate with one another to share best practices. I think this is very important. And then to more specific issues, some initial interventions to consider. We are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, you on the continent of Africa seem to be not having the up and down that we are having here in the UK. I'm not sure whether we're in lockdown or not in lockdown. I'm in lockdown anyway. In the short term, Businesses are undergoing retrenchment and restructuring and dismissal as a result of COVID-19, but it's important to ensure that women are not disproportionately affected. And to do this, you need to look at job-related data and assess the impact that collective dismissals is having on men and women, to ensure that women do not form a disproportionate number of the workers that are negatively impacted. Education and training, we've talked about this before. Women tending to have less of an opportunity for higher level education, which limits their career opportunities. So one, to look at how you can do in-house skills training and education programs. And it's amazing for particularly speaking to SMEs, how many online and sometimes free programs from some of the best institutions there are in the world there are. So you can log into this, get your teams together to have training of some sort, share it with other people. As you can see, Invest in Africa with the Mastercard Foundation doing a fantastic job on this. So just to encourage in-house skills training, you can sponsor young women's education in subjects that your business particularly needs to develop a pipeline for future skilled workers and leaders. And then you could also look at developing a mentorship program so that there are visible role models for young women. But then there's also the training of staff in-house in recognized gender-based discrimination and harassment. A lot of times there's something known as unconscious bias. You might even not know, you've done it for so long, you might not even be aware of doing it. And again, you can have training. There are online resources available to help with this. It's also important to address archaic recruitment practices that have a negative impact, especially on women candidates. And I think, for example, you can insist on a diversity in short lists of candidates. So somebody doesn't bring to you a list of 10 with a token 9 men and a token woman as their short list, or 4 and 5. Insist that more effort should be put into seeking out diversity in recruitment. And I'll say at interviews, and this is something that I'm always shocked when I hear, please do not ask women candidates, particularly young women candidates, when are you planning to have a baby? It is none of your business. And these things are such deterrents, and it's quite unnecessary. Then you can invest in and support your supply chain. I gave the example of Zen Petroleum and the Ladybird Logistics Company. You can, there's freedom, put in place a gender equality statement that communicates a clear commitment to gender equality and a clear zero tolerance policy, and make sure that there are channels through which women can confidently report these incidents. And then have gender sensitive workplace practices and benefits. I've talked about childcare options, flexible working options. We've talked about all those already, and also channels for women to express their concerns. Now, this is quite an important slide for me. It really is important for us also as women to to play our role. Business have an important role in ensuring, promoting gender equality, but we are not passive recipients of change. We are active change agents. And there are a number of steps that we can take to advance our careers. And just to adopt and adapt a well-known phrase, faint heart never won gender equity. That's my phrase. I've corrupted a little bit of a phrase. Now, I will start and end with looking for mentors and sponsors. And those who know me would know that I constantly give credit to those on whose shoulders I have stood and who have lifted me in their hands to progress in my career. And many a successful person will tell the same story. Now, a mentor is usually somebody who's outside of your company, who can provide you with a general life and career guidance, and sometimes a shoulder to lean on. A sponsor, on the other hand, is usually somebody within your company organization who has influence and some power at the leadership table to advocate for you. And it's important that we try to seek these out. Now, I just want to quote from Marcia Chong, founder of the Boardroom Africa, on finding a workplace sponsor. She says, those that effectively leverage their relationships in favor of their careers are able to do so because they do not approach relationships as what can he or she do for me. Everybody has a life story and elements about themselves that they want to share. I build genuine relationships not by being inquisitive about work per se, but by simply trying to understand what makes another person happy. what their passions are. And she tells the story about meeting a very senior person, I think might have been at her workplace, and she just had about a minute with that person. But rather than going to a conversation about work, she struck about a simple conversation which ended up about the man telling her about his family and his passion for arts. And as a result of that, it led him into asking a bit more about her, and then asked her, what do you want to do with your career? And as she puts it, the rest was history. I can tell a similar story. But it's important to try and make an effort to get these mentors and sponsors, because a lot of the other things that I'm talking about for a lot of women will come about because of the encouragement of mentors and sponsors. Exhibiting a high degree of confidence. And I know this isn't always easy, and it's often what holds women back from stepping up into their full potential. Believing that there are no barriers to advancement. And these are trying to overcome the deep societal and organizational barriers that are sometimes placed in our way. Self-advocacy. This is an important exercise of being able to communicate your strengths and accomplishments. And I know most of us women struggle with this, but we need to share how we add value to our businesses and ask for opportunities to grow and advance. Then having a clear shared career plan. Compared to men, women come across as having less clear career goals that are shared with others. I know from my own experience that this isn't true. What it is that we have big dreams, we have big goals, but sometimes we become so daunted by our own goals that we just shrink back and are afraid to voice them. And I just want to quote from a poem by Marianne Williamson, which some of you might know. It starts by saying, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And whenever I read this, I believe it's addressed to us women, mostly. Any woman or man who's successful in moving upwards in their workplace usually plans their career with a long-term horizon in mind and continually shares their plans. And the other thing which is important, is to network with people. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I have to say, the one thing that I may not exactly do well in many others, but one thing I do well is networking. My poor staff are having to deal with a database that I have collected over the years of only God knows how many people I don't want to mention. But it is impossible to advance today without the support of others. And it's important, therefore, to establish both strong internal and external networking points. Now, again, going back to the issue of mentorship, when you're looking to build relationships, don't go with what can he or she do for me. Instead, begin by building those genuine relationships, trying to understand the other person and where you may connect. Finally, as we make it along the journey, we need to support each other as women. For women in the earlier stages of our careers, or even our peers who may not be as confident as we are, we should be mentors and supporters and look to leave a strong female legacy. So gender equality benefits everyone. It benefits individuals, companies are shown, because it gives you competitive advantage. It benefits the economy. McKinsey report shows that in a best-in-region scenario, Africa could add $316 billion, or 10% to GDP in the period from now to 2025 if we were to focus on gender equality. It benefits society. On average, women invest 90% of their incomes into their families, compared to 35% by men. Therefore, financially empowered women are more likely to invest in their children's education, health, and nutrition. I strongly believe that it is both the right thing to do for our continent's future, and it makes good business sense. And to end, going back to my hero that I mentioned at the beginning, Ruth Ginsburg, she fought a good and fair fight. She beat a path where there was none, both for herself and for others. She ran her relay of the gender equality race excellently. When I heard about her death and everybody was saying rest in peace, I found it very difficult to say rest in peace, because I don't want her to rest in peace. I want her to, wherever she is, to continue cheering us on, because the race is still being run. And it's a race that needs both women and girls and men and boys if we're ever to get to the finishing line. So thank you very much. And now time for questions.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. Perhaps as we await the questions, I can give you an overview of what's going on with the poll that we posted earlier.
Yes.
The question. And so far we have had 9 responses. Everybody agrees. Esther says that she agrees. SMEs to thrive, they need to look at the gender lens into perspective. However, she also thinks that there's need for more social inclusive lenses such as disability, inclusion, and investment. So I thought that's important to highlight that she's saying beyond the gender equality, we need to look at how to include other members of the society. Yes, I agree. There's a strong link between investing in women and the performance of business and the economy. Agreed, businesses cannot prosper when half the population is left behind. That is Rosemary. Esther says definitely women are the backbone of all societies, she believes, and having worked as a gender equality, disability, and social inclusion consultant, she has seen the impact women make in communities when invested in and when empowered. I'll highlight a couple more. From Reshma, yes, definitely. Diversity brings in new perspectives and new skills which naturally make business sense to access. And Virginia, yes, I agree because women struggle with the requirements required even by our banks to access financing. And Emily, yes, agreed. Gender equality is essential for everyone on an individual basis and also for society and for business. It will promote diversity of thought and background and will help to find innovative and collaborative solutions. And the final one, Wangeshi says, strongly agree because women deliver. They are more reliable and committed because they care for more than one person and therefore help build society. Women are naturals and more reliable. Susan said it's absolutely smart to invest in women. The benefits are far reaching. The money goes further beyond the business and nuclear family. There has been quite a number of comments around the statistics that you have shared. They're very insightful, are able to give us, the real and true picture of where things are, and to demystify sometimes the vagueness around equality or inequality and where we have been.
So someone has asked whether I could highlight some best practice cases on access to finance. Unfortunately, not off the top of my head immediately. I know there are, but I think what's important is that the very organization that is organizing this Invest in Africa will be a very good source to go to for those cases. I know, for example, that a lot of development finance institutions, which happen to be some of the biggest providers of finance for businesses on the continent, are really looking. An organization like CDC in the UK is really focused on the gender issue, very much so. And I know the bank that I sit on in Ghana, Cal Bank, and I'm sure that Banks also has a Women in Business initiative. And again, we are looking and drilling into what are the issues that might have in the past stopped women or prevented women from getting access to finance. Somebody has asked, what is the greatest barrier to access to finance by women SME owners? And there are all sorts. I think sometimes it's just the traditional mindset. I hate to say this, but most of the time, maybe the more traditional bankers you're going to are not so used to the ideas that you as a woman are bringing about in business. That could be a barrier. The other thing is collateral, and I don't think that's just limited to women. But in order to get finances, a lot of banks and other financial intermediaries are asking for collateral to support your loan facility, and it may be difficult to come across that. And so I think collateral can be a significant barrier. I also think another thing is having a good business plan. And I think this is where organizations like Invest in Africa can help put together a good business plan that you can take, a bankable business plan that you can't take to the bank. From our perspective of Kina Advisory, we're finding, and that's why sustainability is such an important thing, that the issues of environmental, social, and governance best practice are big factors for people who are providing finance. And a lot of SMEs find these daunting. And so we, for example, would work with helping to make sure that you have the standards and practices tailored to suit your business in place. So there can be somebody has put something on very helpful. Reshma, thank you, Reshma, has put on the chat something very helpful about examples for financing targeted towards women. So you can have a look at that. Thank you, Reshma. Wangechi is asking, how do I rate the state of progress made by international companies on gender inclusive sourcing on scale of 1 to 10? Is this growing? Wangechi, you will have noticed from my my presentation that I'm one who's very, very focused on statistics, but I do like to do my research. I think that's a very broad question, and I would dare to say that it depends on the company, it depends on the sector, and also it depends on the geography. But definitely, I think there's been so much talked about. I mean, we are on a journey. We're not where we were before. And I think that's why we are very concerned that the impacts of COVID don't take us back or don't cause us to regress from the benefits we're making. I think a lot more companies are looking at this issue. I don't think they're where they should be. I think we need to keep pushing to make sure that they are there. So if you ask me to scale it, looking globally, I would dare to say we're at a 4 or 5, really, because there's still a lot of work to do, and in some places far less behind anyway. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for that session. You've really given us a very good insight. Could we invite you to connect with Rosalind and Kina Advisory? So you can reach them on email at info@kinaadvisory.com. They're also on LinkedIn, and we have posted a website there. So please feel free to just also get into the website, see what else that Kina Advisory and Rosalind are doing towards ESG and supporting businesses to do better. We also would like to invite our participants to connect with us. We look forward to collaborating with Kina again. There's other as well solutions that we are trying to put together for you. So we really do request you to connect with us. Let us know how we can support you as Invest in Africa. So before we jump off the call and before we release Rosalind, I'd like to check if Wangechi is available. I'd like to invite her to give a word of thanks. Wangechi?
All right. Yes, on behalf of Invest in Africa and the participants joining us today, mine is to really thank you, Rosalind, and the Kina Advisory team. I'd actually posted this on the chat to mention that we are not only just delighted to be hosting you, but it was a great, insightful session. I have already received quite a number of messages and requests on if we could run another round and in partnership with more women-led organizations. Although this is not only for women, it is a topic that is, pervasive, and we need to embed this as a strategy to support organizations to become more sustainable. So first of all, I think we are much more informed as SMEs, and as Invest in Africa, we are willing to champion this conversation and to extend the partnership further with Kina Advisory to look at how we can support SMEs, to become more inclusive, to embed this best global practices. And as you can see, there is a question around access to finance. So I want to believe that we could still co-develop another gender-focused on access to finance with Rosalind. We definitely, we want to actually take time to chew what we have received and engage again. So this was wonderful. It is quite a different masterclass from the ones that we have been conducting, lots of statistics, and we look forward to receiving the notes and to engaging you more. We are quite delighted, and we want to really thank you and really wish you well. And I think it's a journey we are starting together on promoting this very, very much needed area. Sometimes it appears to be new because there's lots of conversations, but less of action. So we are very happy, and we thank you. We definitely will want to host you again, and we'll share the feedback from our participants.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we'll keep the conversation going.